course is like a science and history, right?
Right. So the course I teach, I've been teaching it now for a couple of years, is called the Manhattan Project. That's presumably how you tracked me down in the first place. And it is part of the new general education program at Maryland, these so-called I-series courses, which are in part intended to be interdisciplinary. As I say, I am by training a nuclear physicist, although I don't work on fission professionally. But at the same time, I am definitely an amateur historian, but I've read an awful lot of history, and I thought this would be a remarkably useful way of bringing the two subjects together.
Yeah.
So, have you guys read Richard Rhodes' book, The Making of the Atomic Bomb?
Yeah, I haven't read it, but
You have it, it's part of the case.
Yeah.
That's a marvelous book. I mean, it's really, really brilliant. It won the Pulitzer Prize. So that's the main textbook in my, not textbook, but that's the main book in my class.
Okay.
And then, in addition, I supplement that with a lot of the science that is only done in a sort of half-assed way.
Yeah.
I also have the kids read the play Copenhagen, which is really neat. Again, if you have a chance to read it, it's really good.
Okay.
It's also, you can also get the PBS movie version of it, which would seem to be easier than reading it, except that, and it has the virtue that Daniel Craig, i.e. James Bond, plays Werner Heisenberg, which is kind of neat, but it's a crappy production, so don't bother either. So.
Yeah, so we kind of have like a little bit of a mix of like both like science and maybe you want to like see our like script first to like.
No,
see.
you can just go through it.
Okay. So let's see. We'll just start with. Okay, so we have a part about like who was it? Oh gosh. Oh yeah, like how like Lise Meitner and Otto Fritsch.
Yeah.
How they were like the first people to actually like create like nuclear, or the first one to sustain, I guess, nuclear fission.
No. Okay. So now you got the history screwy, because what actually happened was, it's actually kind of a neat story. Okay. So Lise Meitner, who's Otto Frisch's aunt, as it happens, was working for many, many years in Berlin with Otto Hahn. The Hahn-Meitner collaboration was a remarkably successful one that had gone on for 20 years or thereabouts. They were studying some anomalous results with neutrons bombarding heavy nuclei, and that had come out of Fermi's group in Rome. And in fact, Fermi had created fission. He just didn't know it. And so because So he got strange results, and nobody could make sense of it. Nobody thought that fission was possible. It wasn't even that they thought that fission was impossible. It was so obviously stupid that nobody bothered to think about it. Because since nuclear reactions had been discovered, the nucleus had been discovered in 1911, right, Rutherford. Since they've been discovered, the only things that happen, you shoot something in, and maybe a proton comes out, maybe a neutron comes out. The neutron had only been discovered, by the way, in 1933. Maybe an alpha particle, little things come out. The idea that a nucleus could break in half was just not on anybody's mindset. So even though there was data suggesting it, Fermi misinterpreted the data. And so did everybody else, including Otto Hahn and Lise Meitner. Meitner was the physicist, Hahn was the chemist. Now, at this point, we're getting now into the late 30s, Meitner was ethnically Jewish, although I guess her family had converted to Catholicism. I think her family had converted. But anyway, she was ethnically Jewish. And she was living in Germany under Hitler. All Jews had been fired from civil service jobs. And since she was working at the Kaiser Wilhelm Institute, which was a civil service job, the question is, how did she actually work there? Almost all other Jewish scientists had fled Germany in 33 or 34, simply because they didn't have jobs. I mean, nobody was thinking about the Holocaust. What happened with Meitner was that she was Austrian by birth. And a quirk of the law was that all German Jews could not work in German institutes. But she was Austrian, so she wasn't fired. So she and Otto Hahn were continuing to work as things in Germany were getting more and more complicated. Now, things got very complicated in 1938. Because in 1938, there was the Anschluss, when Germany merged with Austria. Okay? And, the history of that's interesting and complicated. And, the Germans were either invited in or it was a coup d'etat, depending on which Austrians you ask, but it was basically a coup d'etat. And that suddenly put Lise Meitner's situation in trouble, because now suddenly she wasn't an Austrian Jew in Germany, she was a German Jew. And so she had to leave. And in fact, she barely got out. A whole bunch of scientists helped her in various and sundry ways. So she gets out. Niels Bohr has arranged for her to have a job in Sweden. And although that turned out to be a complete catastrophe, but whatever. So while those studies were going on by Hahn and Meitner, Hahn and a young German chemist, Strassmann, were continuing to do these studies that had started with Lise Meitner. And again, they were just shooting neutrons at stuff and looking at what happened. And what they realized was that when they shot the neutrons in, they were getting barium coming out, which would have meant the nucleus had split in half, which was obviously stupid, right? Because that's not possible. What was then done was that what was thought was originally was, well, this must be some new heavy element. When the neutron got absorbed, it made a new element, and that new element happens to be chemically similar to barium. That was what they first thought. But they kept doing more and more refined measurements and became convinced it really was barium, which meant that the nucleus split. Otto Hahn, at this point, sends a letter. Well, actually, he was continuing to send letters to Lise Meitner, but he said, basically, it's acting like barium. Do you have any explanation of what's going on? And she basically said, you must have made a mistake. And then she said, well, weird things have happened in nuclear science before this, so let's think about it. Okay, so this brings us to late fall or early winter in 1938.
Here, hold on just a second.
At this stage, what happens is that so Otto Hahn has given this information to Lise Meitner. She had arranged to go on vacation in Sweden, in some valley near a river, blah, blah, blah. And her nephew, who had a job in Copenhagen, at the Niels Bohr Institute, or at that point it was the Institute for Theoretical Physics, had come out to join her. And so Otto first was going to go cross-country skiing. His aunt at this point was about 60, says, well, we really need to talk about this. I can keep up with you on foot. And she did. So she's trudging along in the snow, he's cross-country skiing, and they're talking about these latest results. And what the two of them realized was, so what they did was come up with a theory as to why what was thought to be impossible before, or not even thought to be impossible, thought to be so stupid you wouldn't even think about it, was actually quite understandable. So they came up with the first theory of fission in 1938. And then almost immediately thereafter, Frisch went back to Copenhagen and did some experiments which showed physically that it was fission happening. And before this, the reason you thought there was fission was because, chemicals appeared magically that would have appeared if fission had taken place, but you didn't see the energy coming out from the fissioning particles. Frisch did a quick experiment, like within days, and showed that, yes, indeed, the energy of fission was happening. So this is long before there were any chain reactions or whatever. Nobody knew that a chain reaction would be possible. But that's the Meitner-Frisch thing.
Okay. And are you picking up the right sound on this? Can you hear it?